Well, good morning. Welcome to EDNA. We've got a pretty busy schedule today, so we'll get started by opening the hearing on House Bill. I have to remember to say House Bill now. House Bill 85, and Representative McGuire, the floor is yours. Introduce the bill. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Senators. I'm Carol McGuire, representing the towns of Allenstown, Dunbarton, Epsom, and Hooksett. And House Bill 85 was a request of the Hospital Association, actually. What it does is it creates a temporary license so that student respiratory therapists can work using what skills they've already learned while they're still in training. It's very limited, and well, it helps them to work while they're in school, and actually having them work in their chosen profession is probably better for them and better for the hospital. So we support it. It passed EDNA and the House unanimously.
Thank you. Questions from the committee? Senator Altshuler.
Reading through the bill, you have to be enrolled in a program in order to have this temporary licensure. If you pause from the program, does your license pause?
Yes, you don't, it's only applicable while you're in school.
While you are,
Yeah.
while you're matriculated. Okay,
Right.
thank you.
Further questions? Senator McGill?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Representative McGuire, for bringing the bill. And if this is a question more appropriate for the director, that's fine as well. What other disciplines like RNs, occupational therapists, physical therapists, paramedics, dietitians also have temporary licensure so they can work while they're in school?
I'm not aware of any.
Okay.
Further
I have
questions?
no objection to the idea, but it was a respiratory therapist who realized that they could be able to be more usefully employed if they had a license indicating they had at least some training.
Further
Follow?
question?
Yep.
Don't they work or do clinical hours as part of their overall curriculum? They have
Yes, and if
didactic
you look
and
at
they
the
have
bill,
clinical hours?
it's on page 1, line 22. That paragraph talks about how they can do what they're actually learning. They don't need a license to do the clinical care.
Further questions? All right, seeing none, thank you. We'll bring up Ben Bradley from the Hospital Association. Good morning and welcome to EDNA.
Morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, my name is Ben Bradley, and I represent the New Hampshire Hospital Association and all 26 community hospitals and specialty hospitals in the state. We do support HB 85, and we very much appreciate Representative McGuire's prime sponsorship of this bill. The origins of this bill stem directly from Health Force New Hampshire, a statewide collaborative of healthcare professionals, including educators and respiratory therapists who work in our hospitals, helping to grow, retain, and sustain a skilled healthcare workforce. They reached out to the Hospital Association to share that many other states, including Maine, Vermont, and Massachusetts, allow respiratory therapy students to work under a temporary license. They have seen firsthand that students opt to work in other states, not New Hampshire, because they can easily obtain a temporary license to work while still a student. Respiratory therapists are very hard to recruit. As of October 2024, which is the latest report available that we've done, there was a 21.7% vacancy rate for hospital-employed respiratory therapists. If we could encourage students to work while going to school here in New Hampshire, there may be a higher likelihood of them deciding to stay and work in New Hampshire once they've graduated. We need to remove barriers to recruiting health professionals such as respiratory therapists, and this bill is a great step in that direction. Just of note, the bill adds a new section for a student temporary license and defines the limited scope to be a student working in a healthcare setting under supervision, may practice for a limited period and can only practice the skills where they have shown competency. This will require rulemaking. The bill also adds language to distinguish between a student practicing their clinical skills strictly as a student versus working as a temporary licensed respiratory therapist. This is to your point, Senator McHugh. And I'm happy to follow up with any additional questions. The bill also requires that the student must show their employer their temporary license in order to get paid for the services they're providing. Really happy to support this bill and answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. One question I have, and I believe it's pretty clear in the bill, but I just want to make sure we have it on the record. They're only allowed to perform while they're under the supervision of a respiratory care practitioner or physician. Is that correct?
That appears to be the
So they
case.
would
Yes.
not be performing anything on their own? without
Correct.
supervision. Okay.
That's
thank you.
correct, yep. And really what it allows the student to do is, outside of their clinical hours, work in a professional setting and get paid for the services that they're providing within the competencies that they've been able to achieve. And that's all, like you said, under the supervision of a licensed professional.
Thank you. Representative McGeer, excuse me, Senator McGeer. Looking at reference.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for taking my question.
Hi, Senator.
And if there's somebody better suited in the room to answer this,
Sure.
that's fine as well. I'm going to give you a scenario and help me understand how this will play out from a patient perspective or a provider who's not a provider in the setting that's not the primary preceptor location or the primary location for the training of this particular respiratory therapist trainee. So the trainee comes to work with their temporary license and they're working at a facility that's not their main clinical site, right? So integral to every respiratory therapist program, and they have didactic and they have clinical. They go clinical somewhere, and that may, what you're saying is that may not be where they're working as a temporary licensee, correct?
It could be or it
May not be. Okay, so let's say it's not in this case. So they show up there on day one, and they're halfway through their program or a third of the way through their program. First of all, at what point can they get this temporary license? On day one? Like 1 week into the program, or
No.
is it specified?
No, I think that the Office of Professional Licensure and Certification may be able to share additional insight into how that happens, but it is not on day one. They have to achieve various competencies and demonstrate that in order to secure the student license.
Okay,
So
so-
it may not be their first year of respiratory therapy schooling. It may be subsequent semesters that they've achieved various competencies.
So at some unknown point, they get this temporary licensure. And that could be after they've had A&P and assessment, cardiology and pharmacology and some part of airway management, right? Let's say. But at some unknown point that they've had some unknown portion of their training. So they go and they're taking care of these patients. And the patient isn't sure, or the fellow providers who are maybe working at cardiac arrest where the respiratory therapist is called on to perform the airway management. And the other providers around the room aren't sure, has this respiratory therapist had advanced airway management? Are they capable and signed off on doing the intubation, which is often, by the way, what they're called on to do, because that's considered their specialty, the airway management. Are they skilled in managing a difficult airway with a bag valve mask or whatever tools they need to do? How do we know? How do the other providers know that that respiratory therapist is a trainee? Like, and then next week, maybe they are equipped because they've advanced further in their training, back at the ranch, back at the academic institution. So how do we know, and how does rulemaking cover that? And does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes total sense. My understanding is it's the responsibility of the supervising provider to ensure that the student that has secured this license to practice within their competencies has an understanding of what that student's capabilities are based on the competencies that they've shown. And through the hiring of that student at the facility, that's why it's important that they're practicing within a healthcare facility. Through the hiring, they continually ensure that that student is up to speed, or the communication with their supervising provider is clearly outlines what they're capable of.
One more?
So they would have to have the same preceptor at every shift, or they have to have a preceptor at the paid job, just like they do at the academic place? Or I'm not sure how
All I would say
that's
is
gonna work.
the clarity in the bill is that it's the supervised, they have to be supervised by a licensed provider that
Okay.
understands the competencies that they're capable of providing those services.
But it's dynamic. Okay, thank you.
Certainly.
Further questions? All right, seeing none, thank you, Ben.
Thank you.
All right, Dee, we'll bring up OPLC. Let you answer the rest of the questions. Good morning and welcome.
Thank you so much. Just for the record, Deanna Juris, Executive Director, OPLC. Always happy to bat clean up here.
Yeah.
So I guess I can just briefly, Senator McGee, your question about how are they going to know? How's the supervisor going to know? I think the answer is the state is not going to know how they know. It's a business decision. And I think any hospital could decide it's too many variables. I don't want to hire a student license because I don't have the ability to manage that. And I think that would be a business decision. There's no obligation that any hospital or any healthcare facility hire these students at all. So that would be my response to that is I am not going to know. But I am going to know that if the supervisor fails to adequately supervise, then there's going to be an issue. Yeah. The one other thing I would like to just note quickly, and then happy to take questions, is we were very specific about the term temporary student license to ensure that the student is there in the middle of it, because we already have temporary licenses that mean different things within the OPLC. So a temporary license typically, or temporary permit, is something for a short amount of time. It's 180 days. There are some provisions in various practice acts that allow somebody to come in and get a temporary license while they're awaiting processing, or if there's different things that have to happen. So that is not the same here. This is a license that will have a 2-year duration, just like every other standard license type within OPLC. And then we also had a discussion, again, with the Hospital Association. We were thinking how to implement that to say, do we limit it to a single renewal? Do we allow it to renew? Do we need any of those caveats? And we just determined that the definition ensures that they are enrolled in a respiratory care educational program. So you would not be able to just continue to renew a temporary, even after school. You would have to be enrolled to be eligible, and it would be a criteria. So as soon as you are no longer a student, whether you complete the program or, to Senator Altschuler's point, you pause or you withdraw, you will no longer be eligible, no matter where within that 2 years you are, and you would not be eligible to renew. So we didn't think that we needed to complicate it there at all, because the definition was so specific. So if that was a consideration that you might have had, that's a discussion that we had as well. So happy to take any other questions.
Do you sort of, I mean, I guess I'm sort of envisioning this functioning like when they're in doing clinical work. They're under my wife works at Lakes Region, and she often trains some of the nursing students that are coming through. Mm-hmm. And, she's obviously aware of what they're doing and what tasks they're supposed to be performing that day. It seems like it's kind of going to work the same way, that they're going to be under that supervision and guidance, or am I mistaken?
So I think it's slightly different in that you will have students who are in a respiratory care program that can perform their services as part of their clinical hours, which would be under supervision without this license, right? They're doing the work, they're not getting paid, they're actually probably paying for the credits for it, right? Outside of those required hours, they could pick up a shift to do some other level of that type of work. So there still would be supervision, it wouldn't be as much teaching, and the requirements for a supervisor for a credit, I think, are different than they would be for just supervising an employee. But I
guess I was looking at the functionality of it, that they're
Yes.
performing a task under supervision is more the way I was.
Yes, and I'm certain the hospitals that have been requesting this have thought about how to operationalize that and are comfortable with this as it was their idea. So I think they're probably comfortable with how they're going to make that work. Yeah.
Questions from the committee? Senator McGee? I'll get you the right title this time.
Thank you. Thank you, Director. So I'll just ask the same question I asked Representative McGuire, just so I'm sure. Are there any other similar healthcare licenses, like registered nurses, occupational therapists, physical therapists, paramedics who work in hospitals and carry patient assignment under expanded scope? Dietitians or any other similarly licensed providers that prior to taking their national boards or state level of licensures are allowed to work under a temporary license in some other hospital without the typical preceptor conditions. Do we have any other temporary license?
We have some similar situations, but none that is a 2-year credential in this way. So this would be slightly unique in that way. There are other provisions, again, where people have completed their training, are able to work under a temporary work permit until they take an exam. Or I'm thinking about actually this committee helped us crafting the language to say students who are matriculating through an RN program could work as an LNA. So again, it's not a temporary student license. It is an actual LNA license, but it's a similar mechanism where they're doing a certain type of work under supervision while working through school. This specific mechanism of a 2-year license considered a temporary student license does not exist anywhere else.
But but an LNA, follow up. Yeah. LNA is a component of a ASN or BSN or RN. It's a lower level. It's almost a stepping stone. It's like a paramedic working as an EMT.
Yes.
Right. I mean, it's a stepping stone. So the LNA curriculum is wholly contained within the ASN or RN or BSN curriculum. So they've already been trained as all of that. So you're allowing them to work using skills that they've fully attained, and they get the licensure. So they're licensed as an LNA. These trainees would not be licensed. They've passed no boards. They've attained no licensure. They've attained no certification when we're just giving them a temporary student license to work. And my concern and my question is, how do we communicate it to the other staff, the patients, the families, that this is a student, where in a precepting situation, it's very clear because there's a preceptor right there.
I think it would be a business decision.
Okay. Fair answer.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Further questions? All right, seeing none, thank you.
Thanks.
Anybody else that would like to testify on House Bill 85? Representative McGuire, do you have further points you wanted to make?
Thank you, Senator. Regarding Senator McHugh's concerns, I think that the rules that will be developed for this could be very easily done to say on the license, this person is qualified to do this, that, or the other task of being a respiratory therapist, and I have to say, I have no idea what they are. And if something like intubation is not listed as one of their competencies, then they would not be allowed to perform one. And yes, and what that would do, it would make it clear to everybody that they're qualified to do task A, whatever task A is. And the patients can be assured, yes, this person has been trained and knows how to do task A, but you can't ask them to do something else. I think that we ought to allow the rules to specify what they're trained in. It does say that they can only work on their competencies and what they've shown their qualifications for. And I think that's important.
Senator McHugh?
Thank you for that suggestion, Representative McGuire, but how do we handle the evolving nature of that competencies as their didactic training progresses? In the rules, because one day you're able to do intubation.
I would say
the
that you
next day
probably try it, semester by semester, or year by year, or whatever the period is. But I have no idea what a respiratory therapist learns, or how long it takes, or how they show their competency. I bow to your greater wisdom on that. But I think that we would definitely want to have the license say they're limited to these particular skills, or whatever.
Further questions from the committee? All right, seeing none, thank you, Representative. Anybody else? All right, seeing none, we're going to close the hearing on House Bill 85. Representative McGuire, you are next up again on House Bill 134, so we will open the hearing on it. Thank you.
Right,
morning,
Carol
welcome
McGuire
again.
again, Merrimack 27. This bill came out of the liaison committee with the State Building Code Control Board. And what it does is that it updates the electrical code to the 2023 version. And it updates the board meeting for ratifying amendments. The electrical code is out of phase with all the others. It's still on a 3-year cycle, but it was from 20 to 23 instead of 18 to 21. Why they do it that way is not my problem, but the updated code with amendments was adopted by the Building Code Review Board, and we're ratifying that. The only other significant amendment that I'm aware of between May and September was the update to the air changes when you're testing a new residence. And that was adopted because we told them to do so in a bill from last year. And I'll try to answer questions, but there's experts here behind me.
All right, thank you, Representative. Any questions? All right, seeing none, thank you. Phil? Yeah, Simon didn't check off speaking, so it's on you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, nice to be here again. My name is Philip Sherman. I speak as the chair of the Building Code Review Board and here primarily to explain the process leading to this bill and to request a very simple amendment. On October 16th of last year, we forwarded recommended legislation to the Advisory Committee on State Building and Fire Codes, which ultimately resulted in this bill. In summary, the bill, as Representative McGuire said, would adopt the 2023 edition of the National Electrical Code with 19 New Hampshire amendments and 2 additional amendments to the 2018 International Energy Conservation Code. The a board-approved report on the 2023 NEC was provided, which identified the relative cost impact of significant changes between the 2020 code and the 2023 NEC. A public hearing was held on the updated code and the amendments, after which the board voted unanimously to recommend this legislation. Most of the amendments are carry forward from previous editions of the code. There are 3 new amendments, each of which save cost, and 5 previous amendments were dropped as they are no longer needed due to changes in the code itself. After we submitted the recommended legislation to the House, the DOJ clarified that the amendment to the 2018 IECC on building air testing rates that Representative McGuire just mentioned, that was 2024 SB 373, was effectively already ratified by the legislature, so it's a little redundant to be part of this package, but it doesn't hurt us. The other amendment adopted the long-standing required energy code submittal form, which we're required to produce as an amendment rather than as a rule, and this has the result of keeping the form in sync with the code. They both hit the street on the same time without the delay of changing a rule. I apologize for surprising Representative McGuire with this, but since the House voted on this bill, 2 other amendments to the current codes have been considered. Amendments to the building code and the residential code correct errors in the current amendment related to when a permit is required for tents. These amendments were intended to both coordinate with the fire code and to increase the permit threshold past most pop-up tents, farmers markets, those kinds of things, which are just all over the place, which the model code would require them to get a building permit for. We try and increase the square footage to exempt a whole bunch of that kind of stuff. Inadvertently, when those amendments were written, they also exempted things like garages and other accessory structures where a permit is necessary and should be required. We've approved, now here's the issue. We've approved one of the amendments to the IRC. The issue is that due to necessary final corrections, we'll not vote on the other amendment to the IBC until our April 11th meeting. It takes us 2 months to do a public hearing and then to notice the public hearing and then vote on it. And we've had some last minute just coordination with the fire code issues. I would recommend or ask that the date on line 9 of the bill be changed to April 11th, 2025. As it takes a 2-month cycle for us to introduce an amendment, hold a public hearing, then approve the amendment, there's no chance that any other amendments would sort of sneak into the process without, having to come back here anyway. So that would simply change the date from, I think it was September in there now, to April 11th, if you deem that suitable.
So just for clarification, what that would allow is this bill would then be ratifying what you're doing
Exactly.
all the way up until
These 2 additional
April
amendments.
11th. Okay,
Right.
just to make sure I understood.
Yeah,
Thank you.
this got out of sync somewhere in the 2021 cycle, and it picked up all accessory structures rather than just tents, which was the intent.
Okay. Thank you. Any further testimony? You ready for questions?
I'm ready.
All right, any questions from the committee? Well, looks like you're gonna get off easy. Now, that was the only one I had. Thank you.
Thank you.
Simon, you didn't want to speak? You guys are all good with us? All right. Anybody else that wants to speak on House Bill 134? Seeing none, we will close the hearing. We have 3 minutes if you want to exec anything. I don't know if you're ready to, or we can wait till
Do the
after.
first one. We do both.
Do we have a
You can do
motion?
it 90 seconds. Motion to move into exec.
Have a second? Moved and seconded, all in favor? Aye. Do we need to caucus for a second? All right. We're gonna, I guess we're gonna hold off for a minute, because why don't we just, well, we'll go caucus for a couple of minutes, then we'll come back and we'll see if we have time. All right, we'll be in recess for 2 minutes. All right, we are, after caucus, we're running a little late, and I want to stay on schedule, so I'm gonna look for a motion to come back out of exec, and we'll hold off on that. Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. All right, and with that, we will open the next hearing, and that is, are you doing 144 for Representative Groden? Carol, are you introducing 144? Yeah, okay. We'll open the hearing on House Bill 144.
Good morning, Carol McGuire, Merrimack 27, and House Bill 144 also passed the House and the committee on unanimously. It simply requires a dental hygienist to pass an exam before administering local anesthesia. This is something that was assumed all along, but one of the audits found out that it actually isn't in statute, so we say, we don't want untrained people administering anesthesia, and this gives us an assurance that they have been trained.
Thank you. Questions from the committee? All right, seeing none, thank you.
Okay, and if you'll excuse me, we're busy upstairs.
All right, well, good luck. Dee, you're testifying on this one, yes? You're here for questions.
Yes, good morning. Just for the record, Deanna Juris, Executive Director, OPLC. Nothing specific, just happy to be available for questions if you have any. I think the representative explained it quite well.
Senator McGill.
What kind of anesthesia?
What kind of?
It says local anesthesia. Can you provide a little color on that?
That would be the extent of my knowledge. I imagine there may be other people behind me that work in the field that may be able to elaborate on what that is, but I do not know, as I am not a hygienist.
Thank you. As I imagine you are aware, there's some ongoing discussion in the dental anesthesia world at the moment.
Yes, this is unrelated to that.
In the rulemaking process, but since those dental hygienists frequently assist in that process and are in the room and are part of the preparatory process, it is connected, in my opinion, connected to that discussion, because they do some of the local administration of anesthesia as part of that process, part of the pre-op and the prep. So I'm wondering which anesthesia is the local anesthesia to which this is referring.
If there is not somebody in the room that can answer that, I can take it back, but I imagine
there is.
There will be. But yes, thank you. I'm happy to be for anything else and then submit to anyone else who knows more than me.
Any further questions from the committee? No. All right, I think we're all set. If you're going to be around and we come up with others, we'll let you know. Did you want to come up and testify on, answer questions? Sure. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning. Hi, my name is Angela Boyle. I'm here representing the Dental Hygienists Association from the DuPont Group. So I'm also a dental hygienist myself, so I hope I can answer some of your questions. So in reference to the anesthesia bill for dentistry, very different. That is moderate, minimal sedation. This is local anesthesia. So if you came into the dental office and you were going to get a deep cleaning, you're going to get a filling, local anesthesia is localized. It's not systemic. And dental hygienists are able to do that. And the dental hygienists that are graduating now from the New Hampshire Technical Institute have that automatically part of their curriculum. Somebody like me that's been practicing for like 100 years, when I first did it, I had to take a separate course. And so the board, this comes out of the board audit from, I think it was like 2017. And so there was a big audit and they found like this doesn't really, like this needs to be cleaned up a little bit. And also hygienists that are coming into the state, we want to make sure that they have the qualifications to be able to administer that local anesthesia. So that's all this bill is.
Further questions? Senator McGill?
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
So that is the Novocaine,
Yes.
locally injected,
Yep.
getting a filling
Yep, or getting a deep cleaning by the dental hygienist. So dental hygienists.
versus
yeah.
what you said.
Exactly, not the moderate.
Preoperative,
Yeah.
oral, right.
That's a
Yes,
whole nother
right, sure,
level of
right. No,
anesthesia.
understood.
Yeah.
Understood.
Yep, great,
Thank you.
thanks.
Any further questions? All right, thank you.
Great, thanks.
Any further testimony on House Bill 144? All right, seeing none, we'll close the hearing. We'll take a motion to go back into exec.
So moved.
Moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
How about we do this one?
This one I'll move off the pass.
We have an ought to pass and a second. Discussion on the bill?
Second.
We have both already.
Okay. Good. Left here's the old.
That's all right. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Move consent.
We have a second?
Second.
Consent has been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any volunteers to take this one out?
I'll take it out.
All right, I saw Senator Reardon's hand first, sorry.
Oh,
I'll
sure.
let you have another one.
Sorry.
Hi,
Are you? Okay.
all right,
How am I doing?
before,
Has had all the jobs.
House Bill 134 is the one we just heard, and this is on the code, building code. Do we have a motion on 134? Not to pass? We'll do it, no, just do a not to pass right now. Do we have a second? Second, all right, and we want to do a committee amendment. And Senator Reardon, you want to move a committee amendment that changes the date on line 9 to 4/11 of 25, September 11th of 25, is that correct? Correct. I'll second. Do we have any discussion on the committee amendment or any further things to add to the committee amendment? All right, seeing none, all in favor of the committee amendment of changing the date on line 9 to April 11th of 25, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? And Senator Reardon has moved out to pass as amended, and I forget who seconded. Someone seconded, Senator Gannon seconds, all right. Further discussion on the bill? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Do a second.
Second.
All in favor of consent?
Aye.
Aye. Senator McGee, you want to take this one out?
Sure.
Sorry, I'm the last one. All right, I want to hold off on House Bill 85 right this minute. We have a question we'd like to get answered before we exec it. So we're not in a hurry, and I want to make sure that we have everyone's questions answered. So we will hold off until probably next week to exec that one.
Are we doing 2 hearings or 1 next week?
Next week, we'll have 5,
Wow.
I think.
5 hearings?
Yeah. Next week.
Oh,
bills.
in
5
one
bills.
day,
Yeah.
are we, okay.
We're gonna meet Monday through Friday every
Oh,
day.
So
I'm
we're
sorry.
also have Thursday for hearings, are we on
No, we'll be
Thursday?
Wednesday morning.
Just Wednesday?
Monday
Yes.
through
We're not
Friday,
doing a double?
one bill per day.
I don't think we need to at this point. I haven't decided that we are unless I see something comes in between now and when I have to do that. But my intention is to just do Wednesday.
One
morning.
day.
Yes. All right, motion to come out of exec?
So moved.
All in favor? Aye. We have, I think we have 2 minutes, right? We have to wait? Yeah, we have to wait 2 more minutes and then we'll open the hearing. All right, we're going to open up the hearing on House Bill 64, and I'll call on Senator Reardon to introduce the bill.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. House Bill 64 expands the definition of veteran for purposes of veteran hiring and employment preferences to include the veteran's spouse and any active duty service member, regardless of length of service. This bill also extends employment preferences for veterans or their spouse to include veteran-owned suppliers of goods and services in dealing with the state.
Thank you, Senator. Kevin Grady, well, maybe you can explain to us what the bill does in Representative Roy's absence. I know they're in session today, so they may be.
Yes. Good morning, Senator. Ladies and gentlemen of the committee. For the record, my name is Kevin Grady. I am a 25-year Air Force veteran, and I'm a 28-year resident of the town of Hooksett, New Hampshire. Today, I am here representing the 20 members of the State Veterans Advisory Committee. We are chartered by State RSA 115:A-8 to speak for the veteran community. We have the 20 members are members that should be familiar to you, people like the VFW, the American Legion, those kind of organizations. And every year we have a legislative committee, which I chair, that looks through all of the bills that are making their way through the House or the Senate that we feel have veteran impact. This year there are 20 of them. 13 of them have either made it through, or there's a couple that are still waiting adjudication in the House, but the 7 of them have been found inexpedient to legislate. And so we're sort of getting into the second round now. And we take a position on those bills, and then I come in and I tell you what our position on that is. One of the tenets of being in the SVAC is we feel very strongly that when one of us serves, the entire family serves. And there's no doubt for anybody who's ever served in the military will tell you the toughest job in the military is being a military spouse. Those folks deal with a lot with deployments, they deal with frequent moves, they deal with a lot of things. And wherever it's possible, especially if it doesn't cost us a lot of money, to advance military spouses to that same status as a military member when we're talking about preferences for hiring or preferences for their small business getting a contract to provide a service or goods for the state, we're in favor of that. So normally I tell folks that we sometimes advocate, we love the spirit and intent of the bill, but sometimes the stubby pencil work is best done by people that are experts at that. So, we do support this legislation, and that's really all I came to tell you this morning.
Thank you. Questions from the committee? All right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Danielle Albert? Representative, which bill are you here on? HB 55. Next one, okay. Thank you. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning. Thank you very much for having me today. My name is Danielle Albert. I'm the Deputy Commissioner of the New Hampshire Department of Labor. The department has reviewed House Bill 64. We understand the language as written, in particular as it relates to the amendments that it's making to RSA 275G, which is in relation to the veterans hiring preference policies and is administered through the Department of Labor. As it relates to this proposed language, the department understands that there are going to be some definitions added to the statute for active duty members, military spouses, and eligible service members who would then be encompassed within the eligible individuals for the hiring preference. So we believe we understand the stated intent and purpose. We believe we can regulate that. We do have a couple of technical points that we would point out and suggest for your consideration. And looking at the proposed bill on page 2, line 16, section 3, actually, really, it's line 18 under section 3, is where the definition of preference employment policy is being updated to include eligible service members or military spouse. If you move down to line 21, section 4, and then further down to line 25, military spouse which is being added to the statute, has now been defined. And it's defined to have the same meaning as that in RSA 2150 Roman numeral 4. RSA 2150 Roman numeral 4 is defining service-connected injury. We believe that the intent was actually to make it Roman numeral 5, because on page 1 of the proposed language, on line 3, there's a newly added definition to RSA 2150, number 5, defining military spouse. So our recommendation would be to simply update Roman numeral 4 to Roman numeral 5 to define the correct term. If passed as written, military spouse would not accurately be defined, and we could see that causing confusion amongst the public. And the only other point that the department would highlight or would note is our understanding, and this is on page 3, line 3, our understanding of the amendment that's being made to RSA 275G3. It's updating the language or altering the language such that a qualifying list of documents to prove eligibility for the veteran's hiring preference may be provided in accordance with RSA 2150, which has something like 24, 25 documents that can be provided. The department's understanding is that this verification of eligibility preference, though amended, is still only applicable to veterans, as the additional definitions for military spouse, active duty member, and eligible service member have not been added to that language. So that would be our understanding in implementing or regulating this, that the verification for eligibility and the ability for the employer to request the documentation enumerated at RSA 2150 would be limited to veterans only. If that's not the intent, there could be some benefit to adding the additional definitions. That would be a determination, I think, that the committees make, but that's our understanding of the language as proposed. And with that, thank you very much, and I'm happy to take any questions if there are any.
Thank you. Appreciate your testimony. Any questions from the committee? All right, seeing none. I don't have anyone else to testify on this, but Kevin, could I bring you back up for 1 second and ask you a question? Kevin, would you be willing to come back? Thank you, and I appreciate you coming back. So you just heard the department's testimony about this last section would only apply to veterans. Do you know if that's the intent?
I don't know if that's the intent, to be honest with you.
Okay.
I don't know that it would just apply to the veteran and not apply to the spouse.
Okay.
I did note the reference to RSA 2150. We've spent a lot of time the last 4 or 5 years trying to get anything that deals with a veteran to refer to RSA 2150. Instead of saying a veteran that did this or that in the language, it says a veteran in accordance with RSA 2150. So, switching that around, I think she said moving from line 4 to line 5, putting in what the definition of a military spouse is, again, it would make sense to us to say, veteran or veterans or veteran military spouse in accordance with RSA 2150.
Yeah, it stays within 2150, it just moves it to paragraph 5, which is where the bill defines. So
Yes, sir.
My reading is I believe the department would be correct on that.
Okay.
All right, thank you, sir.
Yes,
Appreciate
thank
you
you,
coming
sir.
back up. Anybody else that wants to testify on House Bill 64? All right, seeing none, we will close the hearing. We have about 5 minutes. You gotta run up, okay. You okay with it? On this one here? Well, I'm going to exec it, so.
Okay, do what you want.
Do we have a motion to go into exec? Are you guys ready to exec on this one?
Yeah.
All right. We have a motion to go into exec? And second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, House Bill 64. Turn your mic on, please, for a second.
Sure. Clarification on how we're defining military spouse, again.
So you'd be referring to lines 3 and 4 of page 1, is that correct?
I would, no, hang on, lines 3 and 4 of page 1. Okay.
Military spouse means an individual who is legally married to an active duty member of the armed forces and is a
Oh,
cardholder.
so it's that Roman numeral that needs to
Yeah.
change
That's what
there.
she's talking
Yes,
Oh,
that's what
got it,
she
got
was
it, got it,
referring
got
to.
it. I'm in the statute trying to figure it out. Got it.
All right,
It's new.
yes.
Okay.
All right,
So
do
that
we-
would be a committee amendment to change that.
Yes. So do we have a motion to move? Are we ready for that?
One more thing, are there any other references, like beyond that? So, she said, pointed out something on the back page,
Well, her reference on the back page was that
was
this,
the same.
with that, this would only apply to the veteran.
Okay, got it,
and not
thank
the
you.
veteran spouse.
Okay, got it.
Yeah. If you guys want to hold off on this, we don't have to do this today, if you're not comfortable. If there's other questions?
No, I'm good. I'm
All
good. Now that we've, talked that through, I'm good.
Well, I will move on to pass. Do we have a second? Second. Move in second, and I will offer an amendment, committee amendment, page 2, line 24, Kevin. We change Roman numeral 4 to Roman numeral 5.
It's line 25.
Line 25, yeah.
Yep.
You're changing Roman numeral 4 at the end then?
Yes,
the
at the very end of line 25. That should be Roman numeral 5. Got it?
Yeah.
That's it?
That's it.
All right, all in favor of the committee amendment?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And I'll move on to pass as amended. Again, seconds. Discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Consent?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And I will, on consent, and I will take this one out, Kevin. All right, we'll take a motion to come out of exec.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
And we have 3 minutes until we can start the next hearing. We're trying to stay on time.
We're on a tight ship here, Mr. Chairman.
We're trying hard.
Not like that damn judiciary.
It's a wild, wild west in there.
Place is crazy town.
It's hard for me to corral my sheet.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, this is a pretty unified committee on the Being 10 o'clock, we will open the hearing on House Bill 55 and, recognize Representative Mannion to introduce the bill. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Tom Mannion, representing Hillsborough 1 Pelham. So this bill, it basically takes a piece of the existing RSA called the Selective Service Compliance Act and moves it underneath the military benefits and out from underneath the education RSA, where it is right now, because I wanted to remove the component that requires that students applying for higher education must be registered for the draft to do so. As of this year in January, the federal government is no longer requiring draft registration for federal student aid. So now this burden has been pushed down to the states, and the states themselves now have to, any state that has opted into something similar to our RSA now have to police this themselves, and this is a large burden that is now going to be inherited by our higher education. I personally, I served in the Marine Corps. I believe in a all volunteer military, and I believe that a draft, it should happen. Like if the United States comes under attack, I believe that our people will rise to the challenge as they did after 9/11, and our ranks will be filled. I don't think it's necessary to penalize students that are just trying to get higher education, whether they be conscientious objectors or otherwise, that they should be forced to enroll in the selective service if they disagree with that.
All right, so I want to make sure I'm clear. So you're requiring them to be registered with the Selective Service?
It's the other way around.
You're not requiring.
Exactly. The current RSA, so there's two pieces to this. One is if you wish to be employed by the state, you must be registered under a selective service. And then the other is if you wish to attain higher education at a public school, you must also be registered for selective service. The part that was removed by our committee after some discussion with DMAVs, they didn't like the employment part being removed as like a one giant kit and caboodle. So what we ended up doing is just removing the component about higher education, because that from my chair reached out to higher ed, and they like this bill because this is a burden that is now on their shoulders, because FAFSA used to take care of this up front. So any kid applying for student aid couldn't do it if they weren't registered for the draft. But if the feds don't even care anymore that they're registered for the draft, this is now something we just put on our own shoulders for no upside that I can tell.
All right, thank you for the clarification.
Thank you.
I thought I misheard you, and I wanted to, because I thought I knew what the bill did, and then I misunderstood.
Sorry.
Thank you. That's okay. Questions from the committee? Senator Gannon.
Thank you for your service. I appreciate it. Do you think this is going to weaken morale or the spirit of the Corps type thing? So you're telling young people that it's now not necessary, and if in a time of war, now we don't have these names ready. You're going to add to the process of finding soldiers to fight, and then so we won't have enough soldiers ready by not having them their name and knowing who they are. You're going to add to the process and the time needed to raise a bigger army needed for a bigger war than our small army that we currently have.
Thank you for your question. So this doesn't actually stop anything to do with the federal compliance. There's still like an entire, a whole bunch of penalties for failure to register for the selective service. This doesn't do anything of the sort. This just makes it so now, if you just want to attain higher education, it's not a state requirement that you be registered for a federal program. The feds can still slam you. If you are not registered for selective service, this doesn't stop any of the penalties that come down from the federal government for failure to comply.
Thank you.
Senator Altshuler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much for taking my question. So it's my understanding that if a young man, and this is only applicable to boys at this point, doesn't register for selective service, then they are subject to possible incarceration for, I believe, 5 years, a $250,000 fine, and it was my understanding that if you don't register for selective service, you are not eligible for financial aid programs. Now you're telling, this is new. So
Yes.
FAFSA is dropping that. Is that what you're saying?
As of
And
January this year, that is correct, Senator.
so it stopped in January of 2025.
Correct.
Okay. So, follow up?
Yes.
So in order to access federal financial aid Pell Grants and acceptance for financial aid programs, that is no longer on a disqualification. So they're not checking.
That is correct.
Okay. So, follow up?
Yeah.
So in order to so you could get a Pell Grant, right? But to qualify for a financial aid program that's administered through the University System of New Hampshire, we have to make a decision about whether or not to follow up on someone's status with the federal selective service. Is that what this is about?
That is exactly correct. Yeah. Right now, that is
Okay.
currently an RSA. That is the current law right now.
Our current law is congruent with the previous federal law.
Yes, it is. Yes. And now that they repealed it, this burden is just something we've elected on to take on ourselves that the feds don't even care about anymore.
Can I ask one more follow-up?
Sure.
Did you have any, was there any testimony in the House? I've not seen the House report from the university system about their plans on, because there's a whole crop of students that applied and will be getting their acceptances now, between now and May, that have to make decisions, how the university has a plan to address this new burden that's on them to be in compliance with our state law.
Thank you for the question. There was no testimony from them. My chair did reach out to the higher education, and they said that they support this, the bill as amended, which is this version. The original version just removed the entire Selective Service Compliance Act. This one now leaves in place the part that Department of Military Affairs had problems with removing the part that requires Selective Service application to be employed by the state. So that remains. I just moved it. It's now moved under a much more appropriate section in the RSA. It made no sense to leave it under the education section. It's now under like the military benefits section. And but the higher education was on. It was. Yeah, I'm not sure how they were going to implement this and double check it, because I think I'm almost certain they were just carrying, if they had a FAFSA application, it is known that they had to have been registered for Selective Service, and it was just something they can just know. This has been in RSA since the late 90s, is my understanding, so this has been in law for a long time, and they were just carrying on with whatever the feds had in place.
Just for the benefit of the committee, the University System of New Hampshire did sign in favor of the.
Oh, they did?
Yes.
Okay. May I ask one more question?
You may.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for taking my question. So, in moving this into a different section, we are now taking that responsibility of verification at the state level. Did we not already do that? Because, yeah, we did.
Correct. It says in RSA that it's up to the state to, I can read out the exact section here. It says responsibility for compliance. Any official responsible for hiring employees by the state or its political subdivision shall ensure themselves that the applicants comply with this RSA. So that's in the old RSA, now it's in the new one, just under the new section. Exact same thing. It's up to the state. Whoever's hiring individuals must comply. This is something they've had to have complied with since this became RSA in the 90s.
Thank you.
Representative. Further questions? Senator Gannon? No? All set? All right.
Thank you.
Representative. Appreciate you coming down. Enjoy the rest of your day.
I got to run back upstairs.
Understood. Aubrey Friedman? Good morning and welcome.
Good morning. Mr. Chairman, committee members, Aubrey Friedman. I live in Bridgewater. I speak in support of this bill. We've had an all-volunteer, for military, and this has been for over 50 years. So this is kind of silly to have this signing up when, basically the only time, like Pearl Harbor, 9/11, when this country's attacked, people sign up overwhelmingly. There's no problem. Now, foreign wars, that's a completely different story, and there's a message there. But clearly, what we're talking about, our country being attacked, there's no problem with volunteers. So they got rid of the draft, and having these requirements for young, again, only applies to men, to go to a state college, apply for a tax-funded student loan, and to work for the state or local government, you have to be signed up for the Selective Service. Basically, you're registering your body. I mean, does your body belong to you or the state? So I think clearly getting rid of this requirement is a good thing. And the whole spirit of the 13th Amendment, Selective Service, is, registering of it is against the spirit of the 13th Amendment, which I will quote, neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to this jurisdiction. So I think it's pretty clear this is slavery, and there's just no point having men, again, only men, why not women, sign up for registering their bodies when it's not necessary. And even as mentioned, even the federal government is dropping some of their requirements there. So those are I think it's time to get rid of this old relic, and that's why I support the bill. Thank you
for your testimony. Do we have any questions from the committee?
Thank you.
All right, seeing none, thank you. All right, Kevin, come up and tell us why you think it's a bad idea.
And now for something different.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen of the committee. Once again, for the record, my name is Kevin Grady, 25-year Air Force veteran, 28-year resident of the town of Hooksett, again, representing the State Veterans Advisory Committee. We didn't have a lot of discussion on this bill at our meeting. It was unanimously opposed by our members in the original form. Last session, we dealt with two bills that addressed selective service. The first was House Bill 1338, which would have basically restricted information flow out of the state to the federal government about people's status, and it also would have provided a mechanism via a form at the DMV that you could check off to say you wanted to be a conscientious objector. Well, there is a process for that, and that ain't it. So that bill was ITL'd. There was another one that would have required posting statistics about casualties and these kind of things and other data at recruiting stations and at the DMV. That bill also didn't come down to see you folks because it was ITL'd in the House. The current statute looks to me like it dates from 1998, and I don't know why in 1998 they decided to put some additional encouragement, if you will, for our young men to register for selective service. But it had four essential components to it. The first is that you were ineligible to register for higher education. You're ineligible for grants and loans. You were ineligible for a state job. And the fourth component was really who is responsible for ensuring that this is done, and that was on the university system and on the person making the hiring decision in the federal and the state government. And that's what the existing statute says. The original bill was going to get rid of the whole thing. The amended bill just takes out all the university stuff and the scholarship stuff and just leaves in the jobs at the state level. And I used to teach high school for 11 years, and I will tell you, if you're an 18-year-old male and you were going to take these three components, education, scholarships, state job, and put them in order, those would probably be the order that they would be in, and the state job one would be way down here. So as a disincentive, we've kind of picked the easiest ones and the most desirable ones to sort of tacitly encourage that person to sort of blow off something that's going to take 5 minutes of their time. Now, let's get real a little bit on selective service. Number one, we haven't drafted anybody in this country since I was a sophomore at the Air Force Academy back in 1973, okay? So if you wanted to have a discussion at the federal level, okay, not down here, but at the federal level, if you wanted to have a discussion that says, you know what, we think selective service has kind of outlived its usefulness and maybe we don't need it anymore, we could have that discussion. If you wanted to have at the federal level, again, through our congressional delegation, if you wanted to have a discussion that said, you know what, fair is fair. We have all volunteer military and we have women serving in in the Air Force, women are available to serve in every single career field. Okay, why shouldn't women be registering too? Because fair is fair. We could have that discussion at the national level. It seemed to us in the State Veterans Advisory Committee that these penalties at the state level sort of existed to encourage our people to do the right thing. And when you remove that incentive to do the right thing, we feel like it's tacitly approving doing the wrong thing. Now, one other, let's get real a little bit. Yes, there are federal penalties for failure to register for selective service. But the Department of Justice hasn't prosecuted anybody since 1986. In the history of this program, since selective service, since the draft ended in 1973, there have been 20 males that were essentially charged under this thing, and only 12 of them were convicted. And I didn't do the math on which 12 were convicted for you, but my guess is that those 12, it was just an add-on to something else that they had already done that was probably worse. Okay, so the idea of the federal government, you know, if you don't hit send on that thing, the federal government's going to come find you. It's not there. But we feel like removing this is just kind of a step down the road of encouraging people to do the wrong thing, and that doesn't sit well with us. That's the best way I can describe what the mood was for our folks, because we've been dealing with this for a couple of years. And subject to your question, sir, that's all I want to tell you this morning, except to say thank you, Mr. Chairman, or whoever does your schedule, for scheduling these back-to-back and saving me a trip to Concord.
That would be me.
I really do appreciate that, sir.
Thank you. I do try to group topics. Senator Gannon with a question.
Thank you. Does having this list help with the readiness if we were to be in a situation where we needed somebody invasion?
Well,
and we need troops. Will this help you know who's ready and who's able?
I believe it. I believe it would, but then we could have a long and involved discussion of in a World War III scenario where all of a sudden the real big powers are starting to lob stuff at each other. Would any of this even apply? Would that war even last long enough for us to draft folks? I don't know. We could have that discussion too, but it would help us to know where these people are and contact them, especially if we're even in an all volunteer thing. Hey, we need volunteers. Would you like to volunteer? We got your name on our list. Would you like to volunteer?
So I think you answered yes. It would.
Yes, sir. I did answer yes. That's what the Selective Service would tell you as well, I'm sure.
Okay. Thank you.
Senator Altshuler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for answering my question. Just to be clear, this bill does not impede anyone who's required to register for selective service at the age of 18. It moves the responsibility of checking up on it to state jobs, right? Because that's a requirement within our state. And since the federal government is not doing that screening for federal loans and being involved in Pell Grants, it's moving who's checking up. Everyone who's supposed to register is registering this, and the federal government keeps that list, and the federal government can call up the list should we be in need. This is just removing it from the federal scholarship program that is no longer vetting that, correct?
Well, the way I envision this, the way I see the statute as currently written and how it applies to the national requirement to register for selective services, you've got that requirement for all males age 18 and over to register for selective service. Here's a set of penalties associated with your failure to do that. Okay, then down at the state level in 1998, we put up with, here are a couple of incentives to encourage you to do the right thing, and we have the existing RSA down here, and the penalties associated with the existing RSA are you can't go to school here, you can't get a loan here, you can't get a job here working for the state government. Now, taking the requirement to check this thing off of the FAFSA application, which happened in January, and I'm not really familiar with all that. I don't have kids that are trying to get college loans or any of that kind of thing, so I'm really not as read up on that. But there are states that don't have what we have in this, in the current RSA 187-A. There are states that don't have that. So you could go to that state and say, how are you going to ensure compliance with selective service? And they're all going to go, we don't. You do. It's a federal requirement. You guys are the ones that make up the way that you do that, and you do that with the federal penalties should you decide to do that. Now, the selective service does refer people to the Department of Justice that don't register, but as I've said, they haven't prosecuted anybody since 1986.
Further questions? Senator Gannon.
So if I understand what you're saying if we remove these incentives statewide, it's going to be a disincentive to register for selective service. If we take this out, it's going to less encourage kids to sign up.
I'm not saying that it's a disincentive to, that it feels to us like what we're doing here is we're saying tacitly, it's okay not to do it if you don't want to. That's what it feels like to us. And, obviously it may not, other people might look at this differently. You're talking about, with us, we're talking about a group of people, all of whom served, and served in an all volunteer capacity where we could get in when we wanted to and get out when we wanted to. So
Follow-up?
We may have a little different perspective on that than the general person walking the street. Yes, sir.
So is it your belief that the states should support the federal government in this fashion, in this manner?
I believe that the state should support the federal government in literally everything. I don't think the state should be making laws to work around the federal laws. They ought to work through our congressional delegation and change the federal laws that they don't like, but we ought to support the federal laws.
Thank you.
Senator McGee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I apologize for coming back late. Had a constituent group upstairs in the council meeting, and I apologize if this has already been provided, this information. What's the percentage of compliance now with of males in our state that are required? What percentage actually comply with this
I don't know
selective
that we even
registration
keep
requirement?
statistics on who signs up and who doesn't. I
Do you
think
have
the
any
federal,
idea, ballpark?
because I think the federal government would be the only ones that do that. The only thing, I guess there's got to be a database that up at the State House they're using when somebody applies for a state job, that they can type their social security number in and
There
it comes
is.
back and says, this person is registered
There
for
is.
selective service.
Follow up. So if I understand this bill correctly, does this bill only affect the New Hampshire residents, the male New Hampshire residents contained within the roughly 4,800 males who go to UNH? Do I have that right?
Well, in theory, anybody in the university system. So I would assume, I don't know whether the private colleges are considered part of the university system or not. I'm not an expert on that, but they're not. Okay. So I guess it would be within the university system of New Hampshire, and also for state grants, federal loans, those kind of things, state scholarships. So like the scholarship office at UNH would in fact be able to say, no, you're not registered, you can't get a scholarship under the current statute as it's written.
All right, thank you. Any further questions? Thank you, Kevin.
Sorry to
We
take
always
up time,
appreciate
sir.
it.
Yes, sir.
Anybody else that would like to speak on House Bill 55? All right, seeing none, we will close the hearing. And we will open our final hearing on House Bill 236. Representative Munns, you are recognized to come introduce the bill. Good morning and welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, members of the committee. It's my pleasure to be here today to introduce HB 236. For the record, my name is Chris Munns. I am one of the 4 state representatives from Rockingham District 29, representing the town of Hampton. When I was in business school, accounting was one of the disciplines that, shall I say, I did not easily embrace. I spent many Saturday mornings in the supplemental classes offered to me and others of my classmates who were clearly not getting it. That's why when I told some of my classmates at our 5th reunion that I was the financial controller of a business unit, they were shocked. It's also why I have the utmost respect for anyone who invested the time and effort to become a certified public accountant. To earn a CPA in New Hampshire today, you must earn a bachelor's degree or higher with 150 semester hours from an accredited college or university, complete 30 semester hours of accounting courses, including financial accounting, management accounting, auditing, and taxation, complete 24 semester hours of business courses, pass the uniform CPA exam, have no felony record, gain at least 1 year of full-time experience in accounting and/or audit skills, and apply for and obtain at a cost of at least $150 a license to practice in the state. That license must be renewed every 2 years, and to do that, a CPA must complete 40 hours of approved continued professional education courses per year and a minimum of 4 hours of ethics training for each renewal period. In other words, someone who is currently a CPA has put in a great deal of time, effort, and money to pursue that career path, and they should be justifiably proud of their accomplishment and the fact that they can include the title CPA after their name. But then, once they retire and their license lapses, they are no longer allowed to include that title after their name. HB 236 permits the Office of Professional Licensure and Certification to grant an individual who has retired and previously held a certificate as a certified public accountant the honorific title of CPA retired. Any individual who is granted that title may use it on a business card, letterhead, email signature line, or any other document or device, but they may not use it to represent themselves or allow themselves to be represented as a current practicing CPA. They may not also perform or offer to perform services for which a licensed certificate of permit may be required under state law. Not only is this a relatively simple way to recognize a lifetime's worth of work by these dedicated professionals, it permits them to let organizations they want to volunteer at know that they have a particular skill set that might be of significant benefit to those organizations. Someone with the title CPA retired will not be able to complete and sign off on the audited financials for a local food pantry or animal shelter, but they could certainly help those nonprofits organize and report their financial results. And knowing that a CPA retired is helping to oversee their finances could very well help those organizations with their fundraising efforts. This bill was requested by the Board of Accountancy, and it was reviewed by the Office of Professional Licensure and Certification before the House Committee on Executive Departments and Administration recommended it as ought to pass by a vote of 11-1. It then passed the House on the consent calendar. While I cannot say whether OPLC supports the bill, they certainly did not have any issues with the way it was worded. I urge you to recommend this bill as ought to pass to your colleagues in the Senate. I'm happy to try to answer any questions you may have, but I believe there may be some real-life CPAs here who plan to speak to you, and they could probably do a much better job than I can. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Do we have any questions? Senator McGill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for taking my question, Representative Munns. This is a really interesting concept about a post-career or post-licensure retiree designation similar to what we have for military. And I don't know if we have similar designations for other post-career or post-licensure, lapse licensure. So I'm curious if you can opine on that or let us know, are there other licenses where we have retiree designations? And if there's a threshold, I didn't see in the bill if there's a threshold, like do you have to be 20 years to get that retiree designation? Like I think in the military, isn't there 20 years? I think it's 20 years before you use a retiree.
To answer the first question, no, I'm not familiar with any other situation like this, and quite frankly, it never crossed my mind until a constituent of mine who is a CPA approached me and asked me to explore this. As far as qualifications, looking at the bill, the only qualifications are that you must be 55 years of age or older at the time of application and either currently or previously held a certificate as a CPA. Other than that, and I think that's the key thing, whether you've been a CPA in good standing in the past.
So you could be 22 or 25, a CPA, and then let it lapse. What's the period of licensure?
2 years.
3 years?
2 years.
So 2 years licensed CPA from 22 to 24, let it lapse for 30 years, turn 55, and then start using the designation again as a retired CPA? 30 years out of the practice, theoretically?
So now you're getting into that area of questions that I'm hoping the real life CPAs can help with.
If you're not able to answer, that's fine. The question's out there, maybe someone else can.
Okay,
sorry.
One for the question. Going the other way, pre-career, is there and this ties into another bill we heard earlier, is there a CPA trainee license? And do you think that's something we should consider also? In other words, if you, during your training as a CPA, should there be a CPA trainee license to enable these people during their arduous training to work as a CPA trainee? And do you think it's likely that a business would hire them to work in a supervised capacity.
Senator, you're getting off the topic of
So I'm
the
just-
bill completely. Let's keep our
It's not
questions
wrong.
to the topic
Just
of the bill.
asking expert.
You're free to respond if you want.
I don't know that I'd be in favor of that because I think anybody that is pursuing a CPA, the businesses that they are working with understands that. And plus, I don't think that, being a CPA trainee, you really haven't learned the craft yet. I don't know how necessarily what additional value that you would be adding.
Thank you, Representative. Do we have any further questions from the committee? All right, seeing none, we appreciate your testimony.
Thank you very much.
Robin Houston?
Sir, would you mind if I went first, Richard Silverman, because I'm from the board, and we're the ones that brought it up.
Oh, sure, come on up. Yeah, absolutely. My apologies, I didn't catch that the board requested it. Sure, come on in, Lou. Please turn the mic on. There you go. Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and esteemed members of the committee. First of all, I'd like to thank Senator Ashwell-Schiller and Representative Munns for sponsoring this bill. My name is Richard Silverman, and I have been an actively licensed CPA for 49 years in New Hampshire. I serve on the New Hampshire Board of Accountancy, was the previous chairman, and have also served on the board of NASBA, which is the National Association of Boards of Accountancy. I come before you today as a member of the New Hampshire Board of Accountancy to give you the background as to why the board is proposing H.R. 236, a bill to allow CPAs in New Hampshire to use the title retired CPA, an honorific title. The CPA license allows the licensee to provide auditing, attest services, and opine and sign financial statements. Currently, when a CPA no longer wishes to provide these services, there are two choices: either apply for inactive status or let their license expire. In 2018, CPA retired status was adopted by the Uniform Accountancy Act, also known as the UAA. The UAA is an evergreen model act designed to achieve several objectives. As the name of the act suggests, the act advances the goal of uniformity. In addition, the act provides provisions that protect the public interest and promote high professional standards. It is a collaboration of NASBA, the National Association of State Board of Accountancy, and the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants, the trade organization of CPAs. Currently, 22 states have adopted the retired status. With others, it is under consideration. For those states who have adopted the status, many CPAs have applied and been granted the status. The retired status appears in Section 6D of the UAA and acknowledges that CPAs who are at least 55 years of age may place their license in retired status and not continue with the CPE, the continuing professional education requirements. For those CPAs at the end of their careers, this provision offers an exception to ensure that they can continue to offer a limited number of volunteer uncompensated services to the public, as well as support firms in the staffing needs outside of attest services. Nothing in the statute should preclude a retired CPA at least 55 years of age from providing volunteer or uncompensated services, paid tax preparation services, participating in a government-sponsored business mentoring program, or serving on the board of directors for a nonprofit or governmental organization, or serving in a government-appointed advisory board. Licensees may only convert to retired status if they hold or have held a license in good standing. Since fees are handled under the current rules, there is no mention of fees in the bill. Because the administrative time required to support the request would be minimal, the board would recommend a nominal one-time fee. I want to thank you for permitting to explain the bill from the board's perspective. I welcome any questions you may have.
Thank you for your testimony. Excuse me. Any questions from the committee? Senator Gannon.
Yes, sir.
Just because sometime I'll retire from the law, and we don't really have you could be an emeritus or something at the firm, but we don't have that. Other than a feel-good thing, what am I doing here? What am I passing?
Well, you're allowing us to put our CPA status on a business card or a letterhead, providing it has retired. And this brings credibility to the individual and to a board or a nonprofit that they maybe want to serve on.
Okay, fine. Thank you.
Further questions? Senator McGee? Oh, I thought you did. I'm sorry. All right, seeing none, thank you,
Thank you
sir.
very much.
All right, now we'll bring Robin up. Come on up. Good morning.
Good
Welcome.
morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Thank you so much for having me this morning. My name is Robin Houston. I'm the CEO of the New Hampshire Society of CPAs. We're a statewide organization that represents the majority of our current CPAs, our soon-to-be licensed CPAs, students, college students, high schools, and the like. I am in favor of this bill. I spend a majority of my time going to high schools, colleges, going to CPA firms to talk to them about getting into this industry because we have a shortage. Much like many other industries, we have a big shortage and we really need to support our CPAs and the mentoring that could go on with this particular bill. So thank you again for the opportunity to testify in support of HB 236. This grants retired status to certified public accountants. This measure addresses critical challenges within the CPA pipeline, supports the tax and financial advisory sectors, and serves the public good by leveraging the invaluable experience of retired professionals. It's really hard to find people who've been in this industry for 30+ years willing to give back their talents. Currently, as you know, a CPA can either not renew and let their license expire or apply for inactive status. As I mentioned, the accounting profession is facing a significant shortage of CPAs, particularly in the tax and public finance sectors. Granting retired status allows an experienced CPA to remain engaged in the profession on a limited basis, mentoring the next generation, and that's key. We need mentors in this field of accountants by providing specialized knowledge to address seasonal tax surges and complex financial issues. By maintaining a formal connection to the field, retired CPAs can offer critical guidance, reducing burnout, and supporting smaller firms and underserved communities. That's a real thing, and I talk to accountants throughout the state, and there is a burnout factor as well. I'm married to a CPA, and let me tell you, he's putting in 70 to 80 hours a week right now. So any support that we can give nonprofits, students with a retired CPA status is exceptional. So furthermore, as I mentioned, this bill provides flexibility for CPAs who may wish to contribute their expertise in a non-competitive capacity. Many retired professionals are eager to volunteer with nonprofit organizations, offer pro bono financial services, or assist in educational initiatives. Recognizing their retired status while allowing them to contribute responsibly ensures continued public benefit. So I was a board member for the New Hampshire Center for Nonprofits for 6 years. I also worked at the New Hampshire Charitable Foundation as a director. There was not 1 week that went by that I wasn't asked by a nonprofit if I knew of a CPA or someone who can help them with their financials or serve on a committee or just help them with their books. It happens all the time, and it's happening more and more. We have 7,000 nonprofits in New Hampshire, just to throw that out there. For the public, access to seasonal financial advisors enhances confidence in tax preparation, financial planning, and small business support. Particularly in rural and economically disadvantaged areas, retired CPAs can fill gaps where specialized tax knowledge may otherwise be inaccessible. Their wealth of experience, coupled with their commitment to ethical practice, safeguards public trust. In conclusion, I urge you to support Bill HB 236. This legislation is a practical and beneficial step to address workforce challenges, support taxpayers, and sustain the integrity of the accounting profession. Retired CPAs represent an invaluable resource, and this bill ensures their knowledge continues to serve our communities. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you for your testimony. Do we have questions from the committee? Senator McGee? Then I'll get Senator Gammon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for bringing your expertise. Do you think there's a period of time that we should insert into the bill for the scenario I described earlier? Like, should someone serve in the profession for 5-10 years before they would be able to request that retired designation?
Thank you for the question. I don't believe so. I mean, you have people who have been in this profession for a long time, and as Mr. Silverman mentioned, the rigors of the testing and licensing process is long, and you have to have experience just to pass that license. So you already have someone who's in that field, and typically, as we all know, you're not going to necessarily see a 22 or 23-year-old go to a retirement status of a CPA at the early onset of their career. I have not seen it. I've been at the society for 9 years. That's not the typical approach. And I think if you start putting limitations and you start putting timeframes on it, you're going to, in my opinion, it may make it more confusing and convoluted and not what the ultimate goal of this bill is to be.
Well,
So, well, we have the 55-year-old age restriction. So should we take that out? I'm saying if we have, because, so then could a 28-year-old career changer just decide to drop it and then do, say, CPA retired so they can do volunteer work, which I think is great. There are a lot of nonprofits looking for CPA help. I completely agree.
I don't have a problem with the 55-year-old, benchmark. For me, that is probably at least some sort of consideration as far as considered to be retired. And it's a great question as far as people changing careers, but for someone who is in the accounting practice, they are going to stay there for multiple years. 55 is still early to retire, so at least you have some set of guidelines. But I'm not a big fan of restrictions.
Senator Gammon.
Who insures them when they're retired doing pro bono work?
Who insures them?
Yeah, if they give bad advice, they do something wrong, who's going to insure their work?
Well, the UAA, as Mr. Silverman had mentioned, there are guidelines that they have to follow, especially to be in good standing. And with good standing, there's the Board of Accountancy and the OPLC that will oversee their licensing requirements. And let me also say, in the accounting profession, as you may all know, we have CPE, which is Certified Educational Continuing Education, that they consistently have to keep their license in good standing. So you can't have an accountant that all of a sudden does no work for 10 years and then decides they want to come back and give accounting advice. They have to have their continuing education credits.
Thank you. Just to
Sure.
follow up, just so
Yeah,
I understand
of
better.
course.
So you retire, you're 65, 70. Say you retired at 55. Is your knowledge of the craft stale and out of date? And so you shouldn't even be, you're giving out this card. Are they giving advice still when they're 20 years retired at 75?
They are. And they have, if anything, lifelong experiences and practices that make their education even more invaluable. And as I mentioned, they have to have their continuing education credits. You have to have so many per year.
Even when retired?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Correct. Can I have a moment?
Under the retired CPA status, they would not.
Oh, there we go.
Maintain your investment.
Yep. Okay. That's one thing the bill does define.
Okay.
So you brought up a point that I guess I want a clarification. By allowing them to have this retired status, would that be a license still in good standing, not to perform certain tasks, obviously, because the bill limits that, but would that give them that status for doing the volunteer work?
Absolutely. I think that would give them status for volunteer work and advice. And as I mentioned earlier, the mentoring part for young professionals, we have no mentors right now. So that would be invaluable.
All right, thank you. Further questions? Senator Gannon?
Where do they all get their suits? They look so good. We'll talk later.
All right, thank you for testifying. Frederick? Welcome. I think it's Briggs, the last name? I wasn't sure.
Briggs.
It is Briggs, okay.
Correct.
Good morning, sir, welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. As past chairman and a member of the New Hampshire Board of Accountancy for 10 years, I'm here to speak in favor of House Bill 236 relating to the granting of retired status to certified public accountants. The designation of certified public accountants, as you know, is granted at the state level. So what will creating a class of retired CPAs accomplish for the public that we trust, that we serve? It will enable CPAs to serve our communities by volunteering their services to not-for-profits, not-for-profit organizations. It'll assist with new CPAs with training and other educational endeavors. In addition, many CPAs offer their services to organizations such as SCORE, sponsored by the SBA, or tax-free taxpayer services program offered by AARP. As the CPA profession has been experiencing severe shortages of recent college accounting graduates coming into the profession, it has become more important for the CPA, retired CPA, to fill the needs of the volunteer services that I mentioned. Currently, in New Hampshire, in order to use the term CPA, you must be considered active. To use this designation, you need to have continuing professional education every 2 years, totaling 80 hours. Think of this as 2 weeks of costly classroom instruction without compensation to fund it. If this legislation is adopted, it would create a different group of CPAs. As such, that group would not be able to issue and sign financial statements as a CPA, would not be required to take CPE, but could continue to use the designation of CPA followed by retired. It would typically be CPA in parentheses RET. As Mr. Silverman had mentioned, there are currently 22 states that have a retired status. Currently, there is one board for each of the 50 states, plus 5 other U.S. jurisdictions. So of these 55 U.S. jurisdictions, as I mentioned, 22 of them already have a retired status, and many of them, like us, are seeking to get a retired status for other retired individuals. NASBA, as was mentioned, which is the National Association of State Boards of Accountancy, and they have an their association with us is designated to serve state boards throughout the country. They added retirement status to their Uniform Accountancy Act, UAA, in January 2018. So I hope that this information will prove helpful in your deliberations in moving this retired status to become law for the retired CPAs in New Hampshire. Thank you for your opportunity to address this issue with you.
Thank you for your testimony. Do we have any questions from the committee?
Yes,
Senator Gann?
Just a quick question. I like everything you've said. My only thing would be, don't you think to stay sharp at your craft, and if you're going to go out and volunteer, you do continuing legal ed?
Well, certainly as a professional, and you've done 55 years or so, like in my case, you would certainly continue your education, whether it be reading periodicals, but to ask a retired CPA to go out and put in 80 hours every 2 years of continuing formal education and take examinations, I think it's a stretch for.
Okay, thanks.
Further questions? All right, seeing none, thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
So we have Director Jurius here. If anybody has questions, she's offered to be available. Do we want to bring her up, or are there no questions?
I can respond to a few questions.
Okay, come on up. Sure thing.
Sorry, I know I say I put questions and then I hear them and I think, oh, I could address that. So anyway, for the record and for the last time this morning, Deanna Juris, Executive Director, OPLC. I wanted to give a little bit of context. So some of the conversation around continuing ed, retired status, how far out. The Board of Accountancy currently has an inactive status as well. So that already exists where you say, I'm not going to currently be practicing, but I can renew to inactive, and then they can return to active practice. The bill as drafted does contemplate a change from retired to active or retired to inactive in Romans 7 on line 26. So it does contemplate that you could come out of retirement. So I think to that question that Senator Gannon was asking about the continuing ed, we would require that they would meet the requirements for licensure, including continuing education. So it does contemplate that, and there is already an inactive component there in the rules. Another piece from the offices, and there's no concern in operationalizing this. We certainly can do it. We create new licenses regularly every time you pass them, and new statuses to say, the office's mission to protect public health and safety. I don't see that this really has a direct public health and safety component, being able to have a retired status. I understand the respect for the profession and the knowledge and expertise that they have. But from that policy perspective, that might be something to consider as well. Is this essential to public health and safety? Happy to answer any questions that you may have or that I may have brought up in my context there.
Thank you for your testimony. Senator McGue?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Director. This does bring up a good point. At least in the real estate, one of the real estate licenses, the real estate salesperson, there is an active, inactive status. My question is, what prevents the inactive CPA from still using the designation, but just not doing things like signing off on audited books? Can they still represent themselves as a CPA, but just not do like those official things?
I'd have to get back to you on the specifics of those.
What prevents them from just putting CPA in the email signature or whatever? I don't actually know. Why couldn't they?
Yeah, I could look at the rule. I'm sure they could respond to that specifically, but it would be an additional designation. The one other thing, there was a question about other licenses in the office that have a retired status. So there are currently 3. So it would be the Board of Engineers, the Board of Architects, and the Board of Land Surveyors currently have a retired status. So 3 out of the 57 boards have a retired status presently.
Engineer, architects.
Land surveyors.
They have a retired status.
They do presently. They are required to renew every 2 years because it's considered a license approval under 541A, which requires a 2-year renewal under 310. This specifically exempts that renewal criteria, so we'd have to harmonize that with 310 and 541A. I have a lot of lawyers, we'll figure it out, but that is a new provision. So then that would be different than the current practice for those other 3.
Excuse me.
And do they all have Con Ed? Do they all have Con Ed? All those, our architect, engineer, land surveyors, they all have continuing ed requirements to maintain licensure?
While retired?
I don't, on the retired
Pre or
status, I don't
post?
know the answer to that. But to continue regularly, yes, they do.
Further questions? All right, seeing none?
Thank you.
Mr. Sullivan, did you want to come back again and answer that question if you'd like to?
Yeah.
If you wanted to? Sure. Come on back up. It looked like you had a response to it. This is our last hearing, so we got a few minutes. I can have a little liberty today.
A CPA who has not renewed his license, who has gone inactive, cannot use the designation CPA.
Is that in statute, or why not?
Because
Why can't they just use it and just not
You
do
can't use
the
the
official
CPA
stuff?
designation if you are not currently licensed. That's the
Says
rule.
who? I mean, a doctor is always a doctor, but they don't, like, they wouldn't go perform surgery, but you'd still call them doctor. They still say MD in the phone book or on their, I mean, you still
You
call them
can't use the
doctor.
designation unless you're actively licensed.
Is that in statute? I'm
I
asking.
know,
because really
I know
don't
it's in the rules, I'm not sure it's in the statute.
So it's in the rule somewhere. All right.
Yeah.
Somewhere, okay.
All right, thank you, sir. Any further questions?
Okay, does that clear it up?
Yes.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
All right. Anybody else that would like to testify on House Bill 236? I gotta get off the Senate bill thing. All right, seeing none, we will close the hearing. What is the will of the committee? Are we ready to act on this one?
I think it needs to be amended.
Why? Where?
Well, let's go into exec if we want to discuss it, okay? So, exec has been moved. Do we have a
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, we'll have a discussion on House Bill 236. Senator McGee, you had some thoughts.
Yeah, my thoughts are that if there's a 55-year-old, if you have to wait until you're 55 to seek the designation, then there probably ought to be a minimum length of service. Like, just for the scenario I described, if someone's only a CPA for 2, 3, 4 years or 1 or 2 licensure periods, and then they're out of it, and then they decide they want to seek this retirement designation, their knowledge is stale. They haven't maintained the Con Ed. They're 25 years out of it, quarter century out of it. It just doesn't make any sense. Like, to all of a sudden start calling yourself a CPA again.
So would the fix?
So take out one or both.
So would the fix for that be on line 7, changing it to currently held a license and removing that as previously, so that they'd at least be currently practicing at 55? I don't know if it's necessary.
What?
You see what I mean?
Tara,
So I will say the expertise of the CPA is substantial, even if they leave that in their 20s. And there's value to that. I'd say the same thing about an attorney. Attorneys that aren't practicing anymore are still valuable on boards. They're not signing off on the audit. They're not doing the financial statements. They give advice. They lower the risk, especially for nonprofit boards. Somebody who has gone through all of the testing and the requirements to become a CPA in their 20s is a CFO or something like that now. They might not be a practicing CPA, but in fact, that's a skill set that I think stays with you forever. So just as boards love to have a retired attorney on them, they love to have CPAs because it saves them hundreds and hundreds of dollars of hourly advice that they would pay for otherwise. They're not there to do the books, do the tax returns, which is what you keep up on. I haven't done CLEs in a long, long time because I don't practice anymore. But certainly you build on that knowledge. Every day that I come to the legislature, I build on that knowledge as CPAs do. I think the retired status is just a flag to put out there for boards and other individuals that this would be a really valuable board member for them for that purpose. So I'm not worried about some quirky 20-year-old that wins the lottery and then holds himself out to be a retired CPA when he's 60 years old or she's 60 years old. I think that's a real outlying possibility. I think this is an incredibly valuable bill for 7,000 nonprofits that we have in the state of New Hampshire.
Why don't we just remove the 55-year-old age requirement then?
Because I think it at least provides something to attain. It provides some metric of saying, here you go, this demonstrates life experience.
Yeah. It's to be in line with a retirement. And if I may, on line 13 and 14, just to clarify, it's an honorific status. You know, you cannot perform the duties of a licensed CPA. So you can offer that, and having worked in the nonprofit field for a long time, the advice and counsel and mentorship on a board is invaluable, particularly when the state of New Hampshire farms out a lot of its social services to nonprofits around the state. And then those nonprofits lean on their communities to help guide them to be able to perform these services that the state does not. So if we are in the spirit of volunteerism in New Hampshire, where, you know, just like the legislature, everybody's got to take a turn. If you live here in New Hampshire, I'm serving there's 424 of us, or 29 if you include the executive council. We need to create as many avenues for people to give their expertise within their communities. And this is a way to honor the tremendous amount of education that is required to achieve the status of CPA. And so, you know, at the request of the board, who sees that their retirees are looking for this acknowledgement, and again, like the 28-year-old career changer is a hypothetical outlier at this point. I think we should just concentrate on what the board is actually seeing in front of them, the people that are actually retiring out of the profession who still have a lot of expertise to lend to our communities and our nonprofits.
I will admit, I had to read line 13 at least 3 times before, because I was trying to figure out why it was a horrific status. And then I realized it said honorable. And I said, I guess I better read that again. I'm like, it's horrific.
Yeah, well, that's because you had to do all this to get there. Yeah.
Yes, I gotta read that again. All right, do we have a motion on this bill?
That was Representative Munn's experience.
That's horrific.
I'll move on to pass.
We have an ought to pass.
Second.
We have a second. Do we have further discussion on the bill, or did you, I mean, you are free to offer an amendment if you want to.
Yeah, I'll bring one. I think it needs some work. I think there's numerous other licenses. I just did 60 hours to keep an inactive nationally registered paramedic license. Finished the hours this weekend. Real estate licensure also requires Con Ed for a simple real estate salesperson, not a broker. That requires Con Ed. So I think there's a few problems with the bill. So I don't object to moving it forward. I definitely see the benefit. I look for CPAs to help with nonprofits of my own. Fully support the concept of it. I don't think it's as much of an outlier as you think. People getting out of the profession for a while, but I don't want to have the benefits of. I've got gray hair of my own. I look for gray hair and experience to help with nonprofits. So I don't want to stand in the way of it. I think we probably could amend it. Anyhow, I don't want to stand in the way of it, but those are my thoughts on it. So there's a lot of expertise and a lot of people that are willing to volunteer. We should support that in general, especially for nonprofits and people who are willing to help. So,
Further discussion from the committee?
those are my thoughts.
All right, seeing none, all in favor of ought to pass, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
So that passes 4-1. Do you object to going on consent?
No.
Do you have consent? Consent. Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And volunteer.
I'll take it out. It's my
Senator,
bill.
oh, that's right. Senator Altshuler, we'll take this one out. Now, we did not hold on, I think we have one more, right, there we go. That's what I'm looking for. We did not exec 55. Are we ready
Correct.
to, or do we want to?
Therapists?
No, that was the,
We're not really at 85.
right, 85 we're going to hold to get some further information. 55, what's the committee's will on that? That was this.
We're holding respiratory?
Yep, for now.
Holding,
We have a
hold,
couple of questions
okay.
we want to get answered. Are we ready? Are you guys ready on 55?
I'm fine with 55. Seems very housekeeping.
All right, so Senator Gannon moved ITL. Is there a second on that? I have mixed feelings on this bill, Senator. I'm.
Wait till next week.
You want to withdraw?
Withdraw.
All right.
Yeah.
Why don't we hold off on this? I wouldn't mind a little time to mull it just a little bit.
Can I ask Senator Gannon just to expound on?
Sure.
I think you heard me asking the questions. I think it's sending the wrong message to our youth. I think it's gonna hurt the readiness. I don't think the federal government necessarily wanted to get rid of, the compliance part, but they wanted to burden it on the states for us to fulfill it. I think I heard from a lot of military over the weekend. They thought it was not sending the right message to the youth of New Hampshire that they should be supporting the federal government, that they should want to encourage them to support the armed services. They just thought it was the wrong message entirely.
All right, so let's hold that a little. I honestly wouldn't mind a little time to mull that one over too. So.
I'm a little on the fence as well. I think it's.
All right. So we'll, is there a motion to go out of exec?
So moved.
Moved and seconded by Senator McHugh. All in favor? Aye. And that completes our work for today. We will have hearings next week. As of right now, I have 6, I think, with the non-germane amendment, right? I think we have 6 scheduled for next week.
Okay.
For the benefit of the committee. It does look like we're not gonna have session that Thursday, so we could do more on that afternoon if do more than 6 bills that day. If the,
Last time we didn't have a session day, I had Commerce and Judiciary.
You did, okay.
How do you decide who gets the afternoon?
we ask generally.
Yeah, because I had Ed, finance.
Okay, and sometimes it does create
Depends.
conflicts,
Yep.
so. Let me look through the list of bills that we just got assigned, because we just got more yesterday, and I'm trying to see the number that we have in total. Because I think if we can stay doing like 6 a week, we're probably okay to get through what we're gonna have, I'm not sure. But if we get, hit with 40 bills again, the problem is I'm not gonna know that until they get done their work tomorrow.
We'll be done by second week April, right?
Yeah, I don't know what our deadline is, May 15th.
Oh, totally.
I'm just like throwing it out there, yeah, totally
Get them all done
done,
by
be done.
Yeah, we will not be done by the
Oh,
second
all
week
right,
of
all
April.
right. So
All right.
much for setting
How are you?
goals.
Nice to see
All right, with that, we are done for today. Thank you, everybody.
My sister is a